Microsoft should acquire Netflix for their next acquisition.
So why Netflix? For those of you who don't know, Netflix is an online streaming company for both movies and TV shows. They're the leading company in this industry, and this would be a new market for us, but we believe it is an important market for us to enter before some of our competitors beat us to it. For example, Apple, who already has an advantage in music, and we don't want to lose movies and TV to Apple, as well as movies and TV are the next two biggest sectors of the entertainment industry. And we also think it's important for us to get into movies and TV, and especially to acquire Netflix, because we have lately been battling a public perception of us not being a cool or hip company, and we think that by acquiring Netflix, which is a very cool, hip, trendy company, we can help to combat this public perception that has been growing in recent years. We also think we can partner Xbox with Netflix to gain an advantage in the video game industry over both PlayStation and Nintendo. This could work similar to Netflix's already existing system, where we pay or offer a monthly fee, and in return you get to play any video game on the Xbox that you would desire. So without further ado, we will go ahead and move into the details of the acquisition.
We as Microsoft would like to acquire 51% of Netflix's total stock. Netflix has 433,948,000 total shares, so a 51% acquisition would mean we acquire 221,313,480 shares. The reason we want to acquire 51% is so that we have a controlling interest in Netflix. This would guarantee us a seat on the board of directors, and it would also most likely mean that we would have the chairperson of the board. In addition, we would have the power to veto any of management's decisions through our controlling interest. Lastly, while we could buy a much smaller percentage of Netflix, say around 10%, and still be the largest shareholder, which would give us a lot of influence over Netflix decision making, we don't want another company to later come in and acquire Netflix, which then would take away all of our control and influence in Netflix decision making. The considerations that would be given up to Netflix current shareholders is cash. As of market close on April 16, 2018, Netflix stock was trading for $307.78. For this acquisition, we would be offering $338.56 per share. The difference between the current price and what we are offering is a 10% premium on the stock price. Since we are acquiring 221,313,480 shares at $338.56, this would make the total cost of the acquisition $74.927 billion. In that $74.927 billion would include an excess payment of $6.812 billion. The reason for this excess payment is because in order to buy this many shares at once from the market, you have to pay above the market price. We are comfortable with such a large excess payment because of how good Netflix financial statements have been. Diluted earnings per share were very high last year at $1.25 per share. Also, both domestically and internationally, Netflix has seen growth in the streaming subscribers numbers. Internationally, that number is also growing at a growing rate over the past few years. Both streaming segments have also seen improved contribution margins as well as an increase in average monthly revenue per subscriber. Because of these factors and the expected benefits and synergies to us covered later in the presentation, we believe that this excess payment is both fair and reasonable. In order to have the cash on hand to pay for all of these shares, we will need to issue senior unsecured notes to finance this acquisition. We currently have $7.663 billion of cash, which we would not be using at all to finance this purchase. Since the entire purchase is being funded by debt, our long-term liabilities would increase by the $74.927 billion this acquisition will cost us. Currently, our long-term debt is $77.837 billion, so we'd be almost doubling that. While this is a large jump, this is something that we've shown we're comfortable doing in the past. Between 2016 and 2017, our long-term notes went from $40.949 billion to $77.837 billion. In addition, our interest payments would also increase, which we would be paying out semi-annually like with all of our other senior unsecured notes. We chose to use unsecured notes for a few different reasons. First, historically, unsecured senior notes is how we've done our financing. Secondly, we have a very low interest rate on these notes. On all of our current outstanding senior notes, the interest rate is somewhere between 1% and 5%, and on average it's around 3 to 3.5%, which is a very favorable rate. Lastly, operational cash flows have consistently grown over the last 3 years and were $39.507 billion in 2017. Our operational cash flows should continue to grow, especially with this acquisition, allowing us to pay back our debt holders without any worry.
There are many expected synergies and benefits that acquiring Netflix would have to us here at Microsoft. The first would have to be with our competition. Our two biggest competitors are Apple and Amazon, and acquiring Netflix would help bring us into the video streaming market. This would help us compete better with Apple TV and Amazon Prime Video. Another benefit would be to our current products. We are best known for our computer applications such as Microsoft Office, and this acquisition would help bring us into a new sector and better diversify our company. With this acquisition, we would also incorporate Netflix into our current products by adding a Netflix button or app to all of our PCs, computers, and tablets. This would increase the appeal to buy our existing products and also increase Netflix subscriptions. The final and possibly most important benefit this acquisition would have to us would be the financial effects. Netflix would bring in recurring customers and revenues through their annual subscriptions. It has also been estimated that Netflix would add $10 billion to our annual revenue, and with our resources and funding, we could easily scale that within a couple years. It is very important for this acquisition to not only appeal to our shareholders, but also to Netflix's shareholders. Netflix's three largest shareholders are Reed Hastings, the founder and CEO of Netflix, J.C. Hogue, who serves on the board of directors for Netflix, and Neil D. Hunt, who is the former chief product officer at Netflix. Along with these large shareholders, all shareholders would benefit from this acquisition. One important benefit that this would have on Netflix's stock is that their company would be more diversified, which would lower the risk to invest in their company. One of the biggest obstacles for Netflix is the amount of capital needed to produce new video content. With our resources, we would be able to help them produce new content, which would in turn increase their revenues and stock price, benefiting all stockholders. One very important decision regarding this acquisition is whether we should keep Netflix as a separate incorporation or dissolve the company. After much thought, it would be best to keep Netflix as a separate incorporation for three main reasons. The first reason is their brand name. One of Netflix's greatest assets is their brand name. By keeping them as a separate incorporation, we will be able to keep their brand name, which is very well known around the world. The second reason is Reed Hastings. Reed Hastings is the revolutionary founder and CEO of Netflix. By keeping Netflix separate, we could still benefit from his management skills and new ideas. The third reason is Netflix's general nature of business. Many of our current revenues come from one-time sales of products, while Netflix earns a continuous stream of revenue from subscriptions. Overall, keeping them separate would make our accounting and also our budgeting more accurate.
One decision we had to make was whether or not we wanted to purchase Netflix through a one-time acquisition or a step acquisition. We decided a one-time acquisition was best because we are only acquiring 51% of the company. Some of the advantages to doing a one-time acquisition are that we will immediately be able to establish a controlling interest. We will purchase 51% of the company at one time and immediately have our controlling interest. If we were to do a step acquisition, we would have to purchase a smaller share, say 20 to 30% of Netflix initially, so we wouldn't have had a controlling interest until the later acquisition when we purchased the remaining shares. We wanted to immediately gain a controlling interest so that we could go ahead and start influencing decisions and leading Netflix in the direction that we want to go in. Another advantage is that acquiring 100% of the company would have been very costly, but by only acquiring 51%, we are able to penetrate a new market without having to pay the full price for 100% of Netflix's shares. If we were going to purchase 100% of the shares, we would have recommended a step acquisition, because then we could have purchased the controlling interest initially at, say, 51% or so, and then come back later and purchase the remaining shares at a later date. But we felt like this was unnecessary because Netflix was so expensive to purchase, and we could gain all of the benefits we needed by purchasing a controlling interest of 51% of the company. So a one-time acquisition of 51% made more sense. The biggest disadvantage to doing a one-time acquisition is the need to secure $75 billion in capital at one time. We felt like we could overcome this problem by issuing senior unsecured notes. Another consideration we had to make was whether or not we would have intra-entity transactions as a result of this purchase. We decided that there would be downstream intra-entity transactions going from Microsoft to Netflix. And we think this because we have previously expressed an interest in creating an online streaming service for video games, very similar to what Netflix already does for movies and TV shows, where you pay a subscription and you have access to video games. You pay a monthly subscription and you have access to video games online. Acquiring Netflix will give us the technology and the assets needed to accomplish this, but we will still need to sell the games to Netflix. And the selling of the games would make up a downstream intra-entity sale of inventory on our consolidated financial statements. And these are sales that we would expect to occur several times throughout every fiscal year. And because we will want to make sure that we supply Netflix with all of our latest games the second they come out, so that when our Xbox users log on to Netflix, they are able to have access to any game that they might want to play at that time.
Now, as for the asset evaluation, Netflix's balance sheet has several accounts for current assets, property and equipment, and content assets, which come in current and non-current. The current are licensed material that they think is the most important at the moment. The non-current includes licensed material that is less important at the moment and material that they're currently producing. All of this will base on the market value, the fair value, especially for the equipment. The licenses would be at the value you would expect them to be on the market. And then we're going to add on the intangible assets, which we're going to lump into goodwill. And that's a 10% premium we paid when we went to buy the 51% of their stock. Now, this is because of their brand name and their reputation. They have 100 million subscribers, what they call memberships, worldwide, and Netflix, binge watching, that sort of thing, is popular on the internet, in the media. Most people can recognize it. So for that brand name, for that, we have assigned the 10% goodwill that we're going to add on to the assets we will record for them. There's also some risks with the foreign currency. Netflix has no foreign currency hedges, and last year 44% of their revenue was from international sources, and most of this was the Australian dollar, the Canadian dollar, the euro, British pound, Brazilian real, and Japanese yen. Here at Microsoft, we have several foreign currency hedges, and our main ones are for all of those but the Brazilian real. So we hope that having those will help in the end reduce the risk associated with that. And we also hope we can aid Netflix as it begins growing internationally and eventually might branch out into foreign currency hedges.